Greetings, Twitchers. Starting another week of From the Tomes, working on tabletop RPG material, both my game and soon I'll be starting on some Call of Cthulhu stuff. Don't know how much of that I'm actually going to. I showed a little bit of it a couple of weeks ago, but I don't know how much I'm going to broadcast live because it's content for a pending scenario that people are going to be running through. But anyway, From the Tomes, Twitch TV, From the Tomes. If you are watching it on Twitch, you know where to find me. Feel free to go over, search on YouTube, Fox and Board Games. Some custom content coming there, plus the long-term archive of all of these streams. You can also find them temporarily under the Videos tab on your Twitch heads-up display. So they stay for about 2 weeks, I think. Plus, I have some highlights that I'll probably be trimming down even more once I get the YouTube really up and running. But right now, you could see both archives, both one on Twitch and then one over here. There's Peach. Hey, what's up, Peach? It's Monday afternoon, your good Monday afternoon time. foxandboardgames.com. Fox and Board Games on Twitter and Facebook, and soon other social media. And subscribe, follow at the various places. I appreciate all of it. I've gotten such great feedback, and that's part of why I keep going. While I'm on here, putting my writing on display. Good to see you, Peach, and everyone else. I see I got some lurkers out there. Some of my regulars can't show today for various reasons. I was joking with them, saying, well, how's it going to look like I have followers and friends? So, but I'm really appreciative for everybody who has been tuning in and watching me go through this process. It's definitely helped keep me focused, honest. Like today I had a variety of chores and mishaps in the morning, but I said, I got to get on for at least, I started a little bit late today, but at least get on for an hour or two, see how it goes. So that's the reason why I keep coming back. So what are we working on today? I think we're going to continue working on the religion, spirituality, mythology. I've done a lot of writing. I got a little bit done over the weekend. Had some other stuff over the weekend. Hey, there's McNancy. Hey, how are you? Great. I'd be curious to see what you're working on too, McNancy. This weekend ended up being a little consumed elsewhere, but I got some writing on my scenario done as well. But again, I've got one and now possibly two groups who are going to be running through that in the near future. Well, one's running through it right now. So I'm reticent to show too much of that. But I think today I'm going to start on the Frore. Now, the Frore, I haven't decided on the pronunciation yet. It's my word. I can decide it. Are a tribal culture, remnant tribal culture, I guess some would say, who live in the mountains to the northwest. Predominantly, their tribal lands are in the mountains northwest and further west across the new territories. So, printable versions of playbooks, awesome. That's awesome. Printable versions of playbooks, yeah, that's great. Yeah, so that's one thing in designing my scenario, because I do intend to publish it along with the main book and send it out for playtest beforehand. I realized I have to have like an order of operations because it's kind of a murder mystery. So it's not a traditional dungeon crawl or map-based linear scenario. So I was like, I really have to have an order of operations here so that the game master, whoever's going to be running it, has some idea of like how to actually lay this out. You know, in my mind, it's clear how it's going to happen. Then, of course, I realized how that's not going to be the case necessarily. If you have a link that you want to drop here in chat, please feel free. That's part of why I do this. So people can network. Character sheets, yeah. Let's see. As some people call them, character sheets. Yeah, I have to go back for my first playtest scenario, which I've actually run quite a few times now. That will appear in the book, I have to go back and really revise all the character sheets. Let's see. Um, no. No. There we go. No. There we go. So this is the Frore. So, if you want to say that they're kind of hailing from the north, untamed mountains of woodlands to the north, hailing from the untamed mountains of woodlands to the north, the clannish people known as the Frore can be found in many of the cities and villagers. These people, statuesque, wild with bronze skin, their size and reputation for toughness is balanced with their natural affinity for wild places. The Frore now skirt the edge of their former homeland. The peaks and treetops there are haunted by dark-winged horrors. So, as part of the backstory of the invasion of darkness over the land. So yeah, people will probably, especially if they know me and know my interests, they would probably say, "Oh, so they're kind of like your Viking-ish barbarian culture." Not really. They're actually closer to Hungarian, Proto-Hungarian culturally, from what I kind of that cross definitely with some steppes culture and some Native American as far as their totemic affinity. That's kind of what they all the cultures in this world have some of them have literary and fantasy roots. Like I've said, the Hapsha are unapologetically the Roman Empire crossed with the Melanoans. I mean, I'm not even pretending they're not. The Varenka are kind of your H.P. Lovecraft, you know, Stygian dark sorcerer, in touch with otherworldly horror type characters. But the Meluk are a plains culture. The Suat are a little tougher to pin down. I drew a lot of Basque folklore and Basque cultural traits and naming for the Suat, but they're kind of unique because they move around a lot. A lot of people have been like, "Oh, are they gypsies?" Well, first of all, let's not call them gypsies. Let's call them Rom. Second of all, no, not really. They're not like the Ravenloft analog to the Rom. There were these actually originally really bad gypsy stereotypes, like really bad. Like they're all chaotic evil and worship vampires. So the Suat are definitely a little harder to pin down, and their folklore is definitely not related at all to the real world, except maybe myths of R'lyeh and Atlantis. So that's a whole other thing. The Melek are a tribal plains culture that live on the savannas, but they're a horse culture, and they also have aspects of both Native American, Mongolian, and African plains people. They're the Varenka, the cultists. And the Rubari are sort of Mesopotamian, Babylonian, Indo-inspired, Indo-European inspired. The Frore, though, that what makes them unique, well, they're all huge, first of all. They're all, some of them are well over 2 meters. And each family, each clan of the Frore is aligned to an animal totem. And they are the ones who are the kind of the specialists in primeval magic, which, if you want to say druidic magic, natural magic, that kind of thing. So that's where they are. And I thought it'd be a good counterbalance to the very Assyrian, Greco-Roman influenced, Egyptian influenced Rubari, who I was working on last week, and I think are pretty much at a point that it's going to be where it's at now. Again, this book is probably still 9 months away from a finished draft, so I'm sure I'll add more. I'll probably take away more, but let's see how it goes. So I'll go back to my notes on the Frore. I shall go back to the religion and spirituality document. Like I said, I decided to devote my online writing time to this world building stuff. One, because a lot of people have been interested. A lot of people have actually been interested in my scenario writing too. And again, my only hesitation in doing that is that there are people who I know tune in who are going to be playing through some of them. So it's a weird kind of like, I don't want to spoil anything. Like Curzon was on last week. He's like, "Well, I'm walking away from my computer now. I'll turn the sound down." And I was like, nah, I mean, I'm not gonna ruin your game next week. That's not what I'm here for. Let's see, people and the land, history and culture. That's the document that has all this. The good thing about a lot of playtesting online is people found a lot of errors in my character sheets, which is fine. I'm like, oh, that's what you guys are here for. I mean, you're here to enjoy the game, but you're also here to tell me what I've done wrong so I can go back and improve it. So yeah, the story behind the Froor, in addition to their deep history, their deep history is that they migrated from basically a Taiga type environment that is to the north, formally to the north, can't get there from here, at least not right at this moment. And they were one of the first inhabitants of this land. And they've stuck to the mountains and the woods to the north, which is kind of the closest you're going to find to a more traditional European, Northern European setting. So I understand why people have immediately kind of like made that leap, or they like Scandinavians, like Vikings or something. And I'm like, no, they're actually a little different than that. But they had their territory has been in the past few hundred years more encroached upon by supernatural forces. So a lot of them have been forced to go to the lowlands and live and also live among other people, which needless to say they're not thrilled with. Let's see, I'm just reading through my notes. So there's a heavy dose of ancestor worship combined with this totemic mysticism in their culture. Actually, quite a bit written on them already. Okay. Wow, glad someone thought ahead. Wonder who did that. Had a couple Froor characters so far. People seem to like them, like that kind of totemic, barbarian-ish tribal culture, and only barbarian, of course, because they're outsiders. They live for the most part as much as they can outside of civilizations, or town or cities created by other people. So for those who tuned in last week, and especially anybody who contributed, the decision after talking to quite a few more people was that we would call this place the New Territories. I think some of you were here on maybe Tuesday or Thursday. I forget which day, but we had a discussion. Yeah, so and again, we actually discussed this a little bit Wednesday night. I mean, I guess you could say these guys are closer to the Finns, guys being very, very improperly generic. That these people are closer to the Finns in some ways. If we wanted to pin them, and I guess Finns would actually probably be a good analogy, and I only thought of it now after recalling our discussion on Finns not really being Scandinavian, native Finns. Just like the Sami are not native Scandinavian. They're closer to maybe some of the Inuit people in culture. But people tend to lump it all together because they're from the north. They're all Scandinavians. I mean, even the Danes. Yes, the Danes are Scandinavians, but some Danes don't consider themselves Scandinavian, and some Norwegians and Swedes don't consider Danes Scandinavian. So, having spent a lot of time around Norwegians in particular, it's rather interesting hearing them talk about the other Scandinavians. But I'm not going to talk about that here. That's for them to continue their millennium Millennium plural rivalry over. I mean, I guess it can also be equated to like the hill people, Tolkien's hill people, you know, that kind of culture as well. But again, there's no finitely evil or good. Lothar, yeah. Lothar would definitely fit in with their culture. Yeah, yeah. Well, and that's how I kind of wanted to portray them. One, I know people like to play those types of characters. I like to play those types of characters, and um, I thought it would fit and be a really good counterbalance for all the Fertile Crescent pseudo Mesopotamian stuff and pseudo Greco Roman stuff going on in the rest of the territory. Well, I was saying, yeah, for those of us who are involved in the conversation, when I kind of sat back and looked at my maps and looked at my nomenclature, and I realized I had been calling this place the New Kingdoms, yet there are no real kings there. And then it was suggested, because some of it has more Middle Eastern feel, like a caliphate. I'm like, no, there are no caliphs there either. Those are very specific titles, cultural and timeline titles, along with kings. So we kind of had a bunch of ideas. A bunch of people tossed out some cool ideas, and they we kind of came up with new lands or new territories, and I decided on the new territories. So that's this place is called, because territories also have this frontier vibe, this idea that it's not quite fully staked out yet, that there's still room for people to make a kingdom or whatever, a city state. There are city states, but there's no real kingdom. But new city states doesn't match because there's three non-landed cultures floating around, one of whom integrates the Suat, and two of them have their own territories, the Fror and the Melek. Yeah, so that no clerics thing, we didn't even get to that on Wednesday night. I mean, Wednesday night, that topic is so huge. Religion in these things is so huge, and I don't think I want to revisit it this week. But it's, yeah, getting people now, again, like clerics, the original vision of the cleric was this Templar-esque warrior monk, warrior priest, more like the Warhammer warrior priest, though you could argue that's more like a paladin, whatever. And trying to explain to people who don't have the framework out of, well, I'm thinking about revisiting culture this week and talking about some more. So I think these have worked best when I've brought a topic and talked about cultural development in something. And I think that I might do that. I don't know. We'll see. Anyway, culture and religion are just so big. They're so big, and I definitely want to revisit both. And religion, yeah, I mean, trying to explain to people who don't have access or have not had interaction with a non-monotheistic culture, this idea of many gods or anything being possible versus a total absence of something that most modern people would consider a god or goddess or a functioning deity. Like the Fror don't really have a functioning deity. They have ancestral heroes that are in a sense deified. And as I mentioned the other night, we believe that's how a lot of the Norse gods started. They were probably tribal heroes or tribal myths that eventually became supernatural, superhuman, superheroes, right? We don't ruffle any feathers, but in my opinion, one of the only good Shyamalan movies was Unbreakable. I didn't watch any of these. I don't know if there was a sequel. I only watched the first one, but I thought that was brilliant because it really started to touch on this idea of, this cultural hero based in this supernatural flaw, maybe, or this supernatural reputation. It's I dislike all of his other movies intensely. Or I should say, by the end, I disliked every single one of them, even if I liked them all the way through, except for Unbreakable. I just thought that was so. Man, I was just like, this really nailed it. Well, so if we want to look at the tradition, the historical Celts and the Druids, and the Druids, and yes, the Celts had a pantheon. Shaman, right? And shaman's one of those. Hey, Wolfie, and shaman's one of those words that I get really hair trigger about because it's so culturally specific. It's a specific to the Tongass people of Siberia, and that's why when I see some dude at a drum circle, you know, eat a lot of mushrooms and flick back his blonde dreadlocks and call himself a shaman, I twitch pretty badly because I'm like, yeah, no, I mean, do whatever you want. I'm I hang out with all types of people. I'm totally game with what everyone wants to do, but shaman's such a specific cultural word and cultural role. And yeah, and no, yeah, the druids in fantasy are not the druids of history. And anything we know about the druids of history, they were pretty terrifying and pretty horrible people. Jedi locks, yeah, Jeff. Hey, again, you know what? I know a lot of, especially in the couple music scenes I'm into. There's a lot of modern neo pagan hippie, with and that's cool, and I get it, and I'm friends with these people, and they're fun, and I love it. But when you talk about the modern expression, especially coming from a Eurocentric white point of view versus the actual historical environment in which most of these cultures existed. And again, it's if you were to go back to any form of tribal worship, any accounts we have of them, we would probably not have the stomach for them. They were pretty brutal, and they were pretty unapologetic. And again, it's like reading the actual accounts of okay, according to the Romans, of druidic rituals, and again, that's colored by the Roman derisiveness of anything not Roman, right? So again, that's a whole other barrel of historical misinformation and appropriation and misappropriation. It's you just don't know, but by all accounts, but yeah, cultures who had a shaman or a medicine man, or though it's really not a proper term now, witch doctor, you know. Yeah, yeah, exactly, right, right. Or, or there's an even more grotesque um, attribution to a druidic ritual, which I won't repeat here because it's pretty raw and it's pretty awful. But it involves bestiality, and again, we don't know how true it is because it was a Roman account. But you read, even if only 10% of it's true, it's still so far beyond what what you know modern humans could stomach as far as if nothing else, it's animal cruelty. Right. Yes, pretty much. And it's a very similar story. So, again, how much of it's true, I don't know. But the reality is, these are all fantasy games, and people want to have fun playing them, and they don't want to get too terrified or stressed out or horrified. At least not unless you're playing Call of Cthulhu, which I'll always point back to. Well, I guess time I get to work, right? So this leaves our friends the Rubari for the moment. I'll go to the floor. Boy, putting those first words down of anything is always painful. As any of you who right now, check out my formatting. Okay. Yeah, it's pretty cool. And, and I think these things are out there, and I know I'm not the first to come up with cultures like this or draw on these resources, and I certainly won't be the last. And I think it's cool. I think it's cool to see this kind of crossover. I mean, I guess they could almost be like the Sumerians too, Conan's tribe. I guess there's a lot of that in there too. Though I hadn't really thought of it distinctly. If somebody wants to play their barbarian tribal hill people, this will be the people to do it with, and that's great. And what's cool is they're very magically apt, but they're naturally also very physical. So they kind of serve that intermediate point if they're constructed with the character points, that they can in fact function as both a fighter, a warrior type character, and a person who casts magic. And they're not the only ones who can do the primeval magic. Anybody can, but they have a natural affinity to it. Belief system. For the belief system. RD. I'll go back and find what term I'd already come up with for that. I had one term that I really liked for this, but I forget why I decided not to use it. I think I found it actually meant something else, and in another language. It was just like, just didn't resonate with me. That's funny. Apparently, this word house has an Urban Dictionary meaning, but it's nothing too outrageously fun. Oh, that's right. It's apparently very close to the name of a Final Fantasy character. Yeah, that's probably why I didn't stick with that one and chose something else. I was like, yeah. They also have a pantheon of, predictably kind of elemental spirit that they have affinity with, and chimeric beings, natural and supernatural beasts. Let's see. So, PJ, is your whole game set in this culture, or are they just one part of the culture? And if they don't have clerics, how do you handle divine magic? Because I think that's an interesting question. Because if a player wants somebody that casts divine magic, but there's no cleric, do you have some other way to reflect that? Of course, I should really not spend the time editing anything on this other document when I'm writing a new version of it right now, but that's my editor personality kicking in. Okay. So yeah, so it is actually in that specific region, which is pretty cool because it gives a unique flavor to the campaign. Of course, I closed my translation. All right, there we go. Right. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, in Divinity, this whole concept of Divinity, and I've also argued that even in a lot of classical mythologies, Greco Roman on, or even, even perhaps earlier, perhaps Egyptian and Akkadian and all that, that they definitely were revered as things, as beings that could alter the environment. But this goes into that discussion of faith that maybe McNancy brought up or somebody brought up, that is that this idea of this very idea of divinity as we think of it today through most of the modern Western and even some of the Eastern world, is that actually very much a product of our modern concept. Well, yeah, that's kind of starting to go in line with how the Fro are too. So it sounds like we're on the same wavelength because, as I've mentioned, they're very large, and the island they came from is impenetrable, where their ancestors, they believe their living ancestors still live. So I think we can start to piece together any good game master, gamer, fantasy reader, or mythologist can start to piece together where these people might have actually originally come from. But that's for another story. And in fact, like I haven't really brought any of the traditional D&D monsters into play. I mean, there are stories of dragons, but they're more probably closely related to maybe the Eastern dragons or maybe some of the very early medieval idea of dragons as things attached to elements. But the only other thing I actually detail are giants. So again, there's definitely something in the air there. Yeah, societal job, right? Giants need jobs too. I should just start using quotes from previous chats to title the next chat. Excuse me one second. I just have to adjust my back support. because I'm old. I have to basically have back support while I'm sitting for any length of time at this point. All right. Not to mention cooking hobbits or anybody else that comes along. Hill giants are famous for that kind of thing. I mean, okay, in the Hobbit they were trolls, but yeah, Tolkien's trolls are actually in some way more like the hill giants. At least those trolls were. Clans, each aligned with a adds a no reflect. Sounds like a pretty cool world to play a game in, and very different. So there are druids. So there's druidic magic. So does the clerical magic simply not exist in your game? Have you transferred any of it? And now I know D&D isn't what it used to be. And again, I was shocked to find bards and druids are actually two of the most powerful healers in the game. But I'm playing. So in Blake's game, I'm playing a dwarven forge cleric, and that's a pretty cool concept because I don't even have to worship a god to get. I don't have to list. The Mordain is my god, of course, because he's the god of dwarves, forges, etc., etc. But I don't actually draw on him for power. It's the element of the fire. So at least how I made up my character, and Blake was like, yeah, that's cool. So that's pretty cool. That sounds like fun. Now, do you run it online or in person? I forget. I know Jen's posted about it, and you've posted about it on occasion. I wasn't sure if it was an online thing or not. In person, cool. Okay, so you did include actual gods, and so they are in the world. They're just not in this particular society. Okay, I get it. So if somebody wanted to play a cleric, they could play a cleric from one of the free cities, and yeah, that's actually kind of how this is aligned. In the cities, in the two major cities, in Akarth and in Magra there is a whole pantheon of gods and temple rows and the kind of stuff you normally would picture in a ancient fantasy world. Whereas if you go out into the countryside, even let's say the Rubari, who are the oldest culture, out in the countryside, they might just as likely have an altar to a local water spirit if they live on the lake, and Lake Magra is the main economy there, next to the swamps, and they may very well worship something in the lake as much as they do whatever god would be prescribed to them, by the priests in Magra Lynn. So, and I think that's reflective of our own ancient world too. I've got plenty of family stories of good Catholics who believed in other things. Especially if they lived out in the countryside and were far the true word, the true root of the word pagan, the country person, the country belief. So I don't think that's out of line. That's a run-on sentence. Yeah, I'm excited to get to my game in person. I've, and going to see Maiden on Friday night. I hung out with someone who hasn't actually been in the in-person games for a while, but he's anxious to get back to D&D too. So maybe towards the winter I'll run some D&D. Well, it's so, and we've discussed this quite a bit. That as soon as you start bringing, okay, so D&D. So let's get back to the whole discussion of fantasy races in D&D in any game, right? Like D&D is pretty much its own genre now, and with that genre there are certain expectations, and most people's access to the game itself and through gaming is through a core setting, and I think it is challenging for people to say we're going to play D&D but we're not going to have these typical tropes that have cropped up, that are these post Tolkienian tropes that crop up. And again, I'm not knocking that. I mean, when I play D&D, sometimes I just want to play D&D. I want to play my dwarf. I'm not looking for an exercise in introspection here. But in a game like this, where I'm setting it up that there are no demi-humans, anything else that's out there is so alien. The chance of it being a playable race, at least in how I envision the world, is just not there. Again, I do have another culture, species of beings that are out there that have been touched on, and I'm sure at some point someone's going to want to play one. But I guess I'll call them elf-like, fairy-like, but they're not, you know. So I'm sure at some point someone's going to really, oh, this is a really cool. I'd really like to play one. I don't know. I mean, I guess it would depend on the group, depend on the nature of the scenario. All right, so tribal spirits, ancestral tribal spirits, as well as various chimeric beings, spirits. Spirits, as well as various chimeric beings. All right. Let's see. Let's see. In the world of humans, I know you can guess it. Well, I can think of a lot of things. Um, Good question. Unfriendly term the elves have for those few elves who broke. Uh, I mean, I can come up with a number of things, but nothing in particular is ringing a specific bell. Drow. Ah, that's funny. Okay, so that's cool. So you've taken and inverted the concept of the drow elf, the dark elf, into something different. We recently had a whole discussion too again about dark elves and how the whole original D&D idea of a dark elf was kind of, now you're kind of like ooh, like just, yeah. Well, right, and as we know in the original dark elves from Scandinavian mythology, that's exactly what they were. They followed Loki to the underworld. They weren't dark skinned. They didn't necessarily conform to this idea of like what a D&D drow is, but I know they've moved away from making the dark elves dark skinned, which is obviously, you know, I think that's a good idea. Because you know, I've talked to people of non-white ethnicity about that, and they're like, yeah, that's pretty cringy. They're like, yeah, don't do that again. You know, like that's kind of like Robert E. Howard's villains, you know, who are all non-white, and it's like you're kind of like, yeah, I know that they probably didn't think they were being that way, but it definitely came off that way. But yeah, dusky skinned Stygians, yes, dark eyed sorcerers, yeah, in the 30s, yeah, yeah, exactly. Oh yeah, yeah, definitely, yeah. Again, Howard was who he was. I probably would not like to chat with the guy about personal opinions like that for as much as I like his work. But yeah, so this original idea of the dark elves being these oath breakers and outsiders, and you know. For territories, remaining ghosts wander the hillsides and woods. Right. I mean, again, you can appreciate what somebody does creatively, but absolutely realize that socially there would be issues in terms of what your interest is. Let's see. So let's see. Yeah, absolutely. You know, read Heart of Darkness, Conrad's Heart of Darkness. I mean, guaranteed the whole point of that was this colonial intrusion into, you know, it going upriver, you know, and with all this implication of the loss of civility, you know, the loss of propriety as you go into this realm populated by these others. And that's of course what Apocalypse Now is based on. So it's you know, and the erosion of sanity too. The erosion of sanity as your culture shifts. Or to Siaka, the fourth and often placate. Well, yeah, I mean that makes sense. Again, that also satisfies the itch of anyone who wants to play an elf. You know. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Animals for a pantheon of ancestral tribal spirits as well. Even a host of well, that's and that's kind of where we always go with all this, right? Like, how deep into the history do you go? They have it. I want to the lion beings that they have. Beast elemental lion beings that they have an uneasy relationship with. The ancestors. All right, have a good one. Yeah, I'll see you Wednesday, Wolfie. Just so let's figure out what the topic is. Yeah, I'm gonna not run too long today. Like I said, today was kind of a chaos morning, and I basically didn't even get home till 2:15. And I was like, well, I guess I better jump on and do some work. That's what I'm getting paid the big bucks for. Not getting paid big bucks. Hint: not really getting paid big bucks. Huh. I just randomly clicked on something on OBS and it asked me about introducing background music. Excuse me. That's kind of cool. Uneasy relationship with. Transfer goes to Totem. It's like guardian tribal spirits and ancestors of tribes and ancestral heroes called the Sotetsa spirits. Even this whole notion of ancestor worship is really hotly debated, like among Northern European tribes, Germanic tribes in North. I, there's quite a bit of discussion as to what evidence we have that this was undertaken in any formal capacity. I find it hard to believe it wasn't there, considering most cultures we have, especially most tribally based cultures, definitely had ancestor worship. I don't know. I'm not a scholar in that territory. I know a good amount. but I can't say I'm a scholar. I've heard scholars on both sides argue it, so I'm like, I don't know. It's a little bit harder to quantify their beliefs than just a list of gods and goddesses. So where this is all going, of course, is to allow characters to somehow access and build this in as a fundamental part of their character background, their character spirituality. So it's much harder to quantify things like ancestor worship. Yeah, I hate it when work makes you work. That's the worst part of work. No, it wasn't necessarily an argument, but there's been some debate, and I've been privy to some of it in regards to this idea of ancestor worship, particularly among the Northern European proto-cultures. And again, my argument is it's kind of, and I know there's not a lot of evidence for it, at least not anything that's quantifiable. But I think it's kind of silly to think that this very dominant form of supernatural worship in most of the ancient world wasn't existent there just because we haven't found decidedly an ancestral shrine. You know, I don't know. Yeah, how dare they actually try to get you to work? At work. When I'm sitting in my office and writing something, and I'm like, oh, I gotta actually go teach class. Why would I want to do that? Not like I'm being hired to teach or anything. From woods. Siaka, the four often placate these beings for fear of their racial retribution. What I find interesting too is the further you go back and the more you look at a lot of these ancient spiritual beliefs. We talked about this a little bit the other night. So much of it is about let's offer these spirits things in hopes they just ignore us. And even a lot of ancestor worship, that was the case. You didn't want your dead ancestors coming back and creeping around. You know, that was definitely not what you wanted to do. Cat bombing. Really? You're gonna cat bomb me and scratch? This afternoon, slot is close to their feeding time. So how dare I do something besides feed them? Yeah, exactly. Or even, as we know, a lot of vampire myths and even other sorts of ghosts, werewolves, vampires were all interwoven at one point, and they were generally the product of something or someone being rather unhappy and coming back to bother people they knew, and it's always an interesting thing to look at the evolution of folk tales and stuff we come now to know now as horror movies, horror movie monsters and how they originally started. Hi. Speaking of horror movie monsters, rather slinky cat. He's the Halloween cat. Ever since he was little, he would literally do the hunched up and bounce sideways like a cartoon cat. Let's see. See, as well as well, and that's right, and that goes back to our culture discussions. Now maybe we should revisit culture this week. Unless I think of a cool pre-Halloween theme. I've already covered horror and RPGs quite a bit. I'll find some other facet. Maybe monsters or evolution of monsters in RPGs. That might be interesting. Discussing monsters and what roles they play. I don't know. We'll see. Right. So but that's also definitely, and I've discussed this. This goes along with the cultural idea of hospitality, found in many people from historical backdrops that we can look at, especially if they lived in a hostile environment. Whether it was the frozen north or the burning sands of the desert or a woodland, this idea that if in the middle of the night you met a traveler or someone came to your door, you had to go to someone's door. This idea that they would be trustworthy and that you could mutually rely on each other to survive was literally life and death. Especially in America, in most of the modern West, but especially in America, this idea, well, I don't need anybody else. I can do it all on my own. I mean, that's a very American ideal. And it extends into all facets of our life, whether it goes, whether you go from just day to day interactions to politics to ideas of community. It's a very American idea, and it is prominent now in other parts of the Western world. But it's also right. It will, especially in as we found out, in times of disaster. Good luck. Most of us are not equipped to just survive on our own and live off the land and use our laptops as squirrel traps and, survive and care for each other. I know very few people, and only generally those people who have literally lived in the woods the whole lives and hunted or have extensive military training. And I'm not talking about your average guy. I'm talking about people I know who have high-end military training could hope to survive. Movies have given us this very realistic an idea of what a survivor of an apocalypse is going to be able to do, or even a minor natural disaster, even a hurricane, right? Right, exactly. Every animal in the house is showing up because it's close to feeding time. It's like a menagerie. Um, Hi. You've ignored me all day and now you're here. So that ties in with this idea of hospitality and keeping your word, right? Like that was a binding contract, and in many cultures that's all you had was your reputation and your word. It's funny because in working up the city that I'm working on right now, I was like, well, damn, there's no police, right? The concept of the police, as we know it, is very modern. It started in London, and it was an extension of the politics of making undesirables disappear from neighborhoods. Really, is what it was. It wasn't about protecting and serving or law and order or any of these things that we've been conditioned to think of in terms of modern cultures. What police are there for? They were essentially a militia that was meant to sweep out the East End of London, and get rid of undesirables, often at the behest of extremely rich people. And that's kind of the reflection I've taken in terms of the police. When people think about the police or the guard in Margaret Lynn, they're not there to protect you and the player characters. More cats, more dogs. They're there to make sure you don't creep around a noble's house or that you don't disrupt a guild meeting. That's what they're actually there for. So, there's the High Guard, who's the military force, but they're meant to repel armies. They're not, or fight off an invasion. They're not meant there to help you get directions someplace. And that's a little hard, I think, for modern players to wrap their minds around. Because even in D&D, the town guard is kind of like the police. Oh, they caught me stealing. They're gonna take me to jail. That's yeah, for life. Yeah. Change that to forever for the medieval world and the ancient world. But it's the function of law enforcement and how laws are handled in these ancient cultures, again, is not anything we necessarily would want to be on the wrong end of. It was pretty, maybe countries like some South American countries that I've seen documentaries on, as far as their penal system and their legal system, or some of the very rural parts of Southeast Asia, are the closest things we could think of that if you break one of these laws that are often very arbitrary, you suddenly just disappear to a dungeon. That's kind of how it goes. This idea of an enlightened legal system like we have here, whether that's kind of a myth in and of itself too, is a whole different discussion I'm not going to get into. But this idea of the legal system being there to protect you is very modern. And again, people are definitely welcome. And again, and in D&D, I throw all this out the window, and it's very D&D oftentimes. And there's the friendly town guard, and your character can get away with a very loose amount of naughtiness if you're a player character. It's not this extremely brutal or dark system. Well, so that's right. And so actually I was reading a little bit on the ancient world and legal advisors in the ancient world. And they did have legal advisors, but all the legal advisor really did was tell you what the laws were. And very very rarely was this opportunity for you to argue your case and get away with it. It was mostly just based um on accusation. The law enforcement was all based on accusation, and generally the more prominent person won forever. I mean it's like that today, right? We know that, but it was really like that historically. If a rich guild member accused you of stealing from them, whether you did or not, if you weren't also a rich guild member or someone equally prominent, you were pretty much up the creek. And probably anything that happened to you was going to be not very nice. The baby cat. See? Ridiculous. Well, exactly. The Magna Carta, followed by our own legal document and all these other things. Quantifying actual human rights is, even legal rights, even basic legal rights. All right, man. Catch you on Wednesday. I'm going to be on for just a little bit too. Thanks for coming on and chatting. Hope your game's going well. Everybody else who's watching, hope you're doing well. Thanks for coming on, even if you're just lurking and hanging out. I'll be on for a few more minutes, and I will also be dealing with my own non-online life things. I guess I got a little bit done today. It was good kind of bouncing ideas around. That's as much what these sessions are for as deep writing. I mean, honestly, often my deep writing comes at like 10 o'clock or later at night till 2 in the morning. That's when I actually get the bulk of my writing done, anything that's content driven. But this is good to just kind of flesh out stuff, talk through things, just let people know what I'm doing and how I'm working and seeing how other people work. You get to watch me get chewed on by a cat. Of course, I normally wear black shirts, and I have a black cat, so it's the old joke. Let me see a picture of your black cat, and there's just this black blob. I guess I'll finish this thought off. Spaces. So I guess the four categories of the 4 categories of supernatural creatures they have are there, or divine creatures they have are their animal totems and spirits. Which I guess I can define that. Whoop. The animal totems. Those are not representative. Single type of the species. So animal totems. I guess this applies to all totemic beliefs, but I've heard it really well described that animal totems are not representative of the specific single type of animal. That dog. They're not representative of the dog that's laying next to me. They're not even representative of dogs of a species. They're representative of all the qualities. The apex example, the archetypical manifestation of that animal and all the qualities we ascribe to that creature. And I think that goes a bit above and beyond what most people think of when they think, oh, my spirit animal. They think it's like this friendly fox that follows them around and talks to them. Which I'm not saying those aren't real either, but that's not necessarily what a totem is. A totem, at least in my opinion, resonates as something much grander. Imagination. It's nice to know how to spell when you're sitting here writing stuff, right? Some magical creatures, strange chimera, monsters, and mythical beings at the fore. Aspects of raw nature, human emotion, or even abstract thought. Let's see. Ancestors, guardian tribal spirits. And ghosts and ancestors. Four. These are all considered the ancestors. Yeah, absolutely. Please do. Please throw out anything you want to share with anyone who views this, or I would sure like to take a look at it too. I think it'd be cool. Cool. Here, clicking on the wrong screen to try to view it. Brilliant there. Cool. That looks good. I haven't gotten to this level of design with my sheets yet. My sheets are still pretty raw. Nice. So what's kind of the concept of the game? Is it I'm not sure if you mentioned it last time. So this is the character sheet for the Hawker archetype, I would guess. And it's great you have things like the asset descriptions right there. That's one thing that I have been lacking on my sheets, and I know I've been lacking on my sheets, is um, a way for a way to quickly access how some of the things work. Yeah, cool. So is it analogous to our real world frontier? The old west or something similar? Or is it its own world? I think I followed you, and I think I did take a quick look at it. I didn't get a chance to take a deep look at it yet, though. If you have a link to the game itself that you want to post, please go ahead and do that. Yeah, cool. Yeah, no, that's great. That's a great way to approach it. I think there's a pretty big call, and if you go back, I don't remember when now, several months ago, but I actually had a discussion about system specific versus and I use the word generic, but I don't mean generic in a negative sense. Let's say non setting specific rule systems that you could do a lot of that interchanging with. And I definitely think a lot of people are enjoying having a system that if it's do you want to make it more, you know, old west like? Do you want to make it more fantasy like? Do you want to reduce some of the political aspects or, you know, the complexities, political complexities, and make it more about adventure? Do you want to make it a pure game about city and politics and all the culture and all these other things? Yeah, that's pretty cool. So the party gets to actually establish the kind of environment. That's cool. I know that's a thing too. Games that have a lot more early fundamental group based foundation versus the kind of unidirectional game master is godly all seeing eye, that a lot of the old school revival games and similar sorts of games propagate. And again, I fully admit that I'm much more in the OSR category of storytelling. But in any of our games, like even when we sat down for the first session of Tales of the Hard Land this past 2 weeks ago, I put down the map of the city and I said to the players, okay, well, where are you at? Tell me about the area around wherever your character lives or wherever they frequent. It was a little bit less formal, but I let them definitely give input into the development of this world, into the development of their campaign setting. I remember some of our best old school D&D games were just sitting down a city map and having the players come up with something to do. Now, I guarantee that takes players who really want to do that. That takes a game master who's willing to let players do that. Whereas my D&D group is totally just fine with me here. Here's your hired job of the week. They're fine playing D&D like that, and that's fine for me too. That looks like a cool game. Why are these lines coming out? So why are the settlers coming up? That's pretty cool. It definitely be interesting to see how it develops. Are you doing play tests of it yet, online or anything like that? More cat bombing. You stop. You don't need to scratch on everything. Now you do because you're a cat. Speaking of gargoyles, I typed the word gargoyle and this is what I find. I don't know if you've ever looked at the game's Heart or Spire. They have a little bit of a reminiscence of this in that it seemed to be this very kind of like evolving world that went on as the players played it. It's really interesting. I had a little hard time wrapping my mind around it, but and we only played a couple hours of it, but it was interesting. Yeah, Spire is kind of Spire was the first one, and then Heart was the sequel to it, and we played Heart, but there were references to Spire in it. It was definitely odd. It was definitely unusual. It was a unique way to handle a fantasy setting because it reminds me a little bit of this that it more or less quite literally evolved as we moved through the space, and we gave the input as to what this game was really about. My one friend Neil, who's on here periodically when he can make his, he ran it. And he's into a lot of these really kind of more niche games with really non-traditional systems. And I think they're definitely interesting to look at. Yeah, I don't know any of those. I would be curious to check them out, and I will in fact copy that, and I will paste it into a note to myself. Because as I said, stylistically, I think I'm in a different place as far as gaming, and what I tend to like to write and run. Okay. Now I want it to take more than Stone Top. I'll also ask. I'll also ask. Ask my friend if he's played these or heard of these. Stone Top. Fellowship, Mountain Home. I think there's definitely an emergence of games that address kind of really specific player styles and niches and interests. Where I think that's a good way to step back from this idea of having this huge world that you can like take pockets of and make it something different to suit what you want. I think this is kind of the retro engineering of that in a way. Powered by the Apocalypse. Okay, yeah, sure. Okay, all right. So I am familiar a little bit with it's Forged in the Dark. Like, is it offshoot kind of its own thing? Cool. So Powered by the Apocalypse, I am familiar with it because that was also the original Deadlands, right? If I'm thinking of the right thing, by Pinnacle, I think. Well, I don't know what that was. All right. Unfortunately, I think it's time for me to bounce off for a bit. I'll be back tomorrow. Well, between 11 and noon. I do have an appointment first thing in the morning, but I should be done with it fairly early. Yes. Yes. Yeah. That's what I thought. I thought Deadlands was kind of the predecessor, and that elements of that made it into Powered by the Apocalypse. All right. So again, this is from the tomes. TTRPG development, writing, design, chat. Chat probably being the most interesting and important thing because I could sit here and do this all by myself, but it's not as interesting. It's not having input from other people, other gamers, game masters, designers, players. Twitch TV from the tomes. Yeah. Oh, that's always it though, right? Like now, all I have to do is go do this 30 more times, or write another 50 pages, or yeah. No, I absolutely know that feeling. And that's always my joke is like, oh, so the end result of this day's work session was now I just have when I started writing this current playtest scenario, which I keep calling it that, it's a full blown scenario for the game, but it just cascaded into all these things that I realized I had never addressed anywhere in the world building or the rules, and it was just like wow, like when I actually started to start writing it, it became this monumental chore going back through these other rules and picking through what I had been developing. But that's why it's work, right? That's why it's a thing that's the silly old saying. Well, if it were simple, everybody would do it. That's the reason why it takes something to decide you're going to dig in and commit to it, because it is this big commitment. Twitch TV from the Tomes, Fox and Board Games on YouTube. Again, we have some custom content coming hopefully now very soon. I've been saying it for months for the YouTube channel. There's already a couple custom videos up there, but hopefully some more stuff will be appearing as I work on Tales of the Harrowed Land RPG. foxandboardgames.com is where all of this lives, and you can get to all the stuff from there. I'm over on Twitter and Facebook, Fox and Board Games. Thanks a lot, everybody, for subscribing, liking, following all these various channels, for coming on and chatting. Not only chatting about what I'm doing, but sharing your own worlds, your own visions. That, to me, is the fun of it. That's why I'm here. It's good talking to you, McNancy. Good seeing your work. Kind of stuff you're coming up with. The character sheet looks great. I'll do a quick share of that. Actually, I'm not going to share it because I don't know if it's meant to be shared publicly yet, but I know you have a Twitch channel too, and people can jump over there and see what you're up to over there. So thanks a lot. I'll be back on tomorrow and throughout the rest of the week. Have a great day.